reading community. Happy Tuesday and welcome to this Facebook Live class all about answering the question, is the way that you learned how to read really the best way to teach your child? I'm so excited to share some thoughts about this topic this afternoon and to share what I think and what I believe the research says is the best way to teach your child how to read. I want to share what I've been learning and what I've been hearing from the research, from what scientists and teachers who are studying our brains and studying how kids learn to read, what they are saying about what we should be doing to teach our kids, and about what strategies don't work. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with you so that all of us as homeschool parents can do the best job that we possibly can for our kids as we're teaching them to read. We're going to talk today about the way that we teach our kids to read and also the way that we learned how to read. And we're going to see if there are some similarities, some differences, what the science has taught us about teaching reading, maybe since we learned, and how we can really learn from that and follow those best practices. So I'm really excited to jump into that. And I want to start with like a really quick 2-minute history of reading and how it's been taught, because I think this is something that's really going to help us to understand how we got to the place that we're at today and what we need to do when we're teaching our kids. So when a long time ago, when parents and teachers were teaching their kids how to read, the very first thing that people did, that a lot of us have done for many, many, many years, is phonics. So teaching sounds and then helping kids understand how to put those sounds together to make words. Then in about 1930 or so, people started to get the idea that maybe this wasn't how we learn, maybe this isn't how we read, and so maybe we need to find a better way. So they started looking for different ways that we could teach reading, and from about 1930-ish to about 1965-ish or so, a different method was the most popular, and this was the whole word method. So parents would read books to their kids, they would ask their kids to memorize words by their shape, and that was how kids learned how to read. So this is probably what Sasha was talking about just a minute ago. If you're sitting down and reading a book and you're supposed to be memorizing all of those words in that book by their shape, then you're learning to read using the whole word method. And that was super, super, super popular during a good portion of the 1900s as parents were teaching their kids. The problem was that in about the 1970s and 80s, science started to do some research to see, is this really the best way for kids to be learning? And the scientists pretty quickly figured out that it actually wasn't, that it didn't line up with how our brain reads words, and it also didn't line up with how our brain learns to read and learns to store words. And so the pendulum started to swing back away from learning whole words and back towards learning sounds. But the problem was that it didn't swing all the way, or it didn't swing far enough. And so today we have sort of a hybrid system of learning to read that people call lots of different things, but the biggest word that you probably are going to hear is balanced literacy. And so this is a word for sort of a hybrid system where kids kind of learn sounds, but they still mostly are learning to memorize sight words. And if you could go and be a fly on the wall in most of our public schools in the United States right now, this is what you would see. You would see a lot of sight word lists where kids have to memorize sight word lists. Let me know if you have seen those in the comments. There's several that are super, super popular, especially with homeschool resources. So there's the Dolch list and the Fry list are the two most common. Let me know in the comments if you have seen those sight word lists. The way that those work is they ask kids to memorize the most common words that they'll see, with the idea that when they have all of those words memorized, they will be able to be a faster reader. And then this balanced literacy method also teaches kids some strategies that are supposed to help them become better readers. So these are strategies like, if you see a word that you don't know, you should probably just skip it. Maybe it won't matter anyway. Or if you don't know a word, maybe you could just guess what it means. Maybe you could look at the picture and that would give you a clue. So there's all of these strategies that readers are supposed to be learning. And the theory was that those are the strategies that confident, adult, fluent readers use. And so we should teach those to our kids who can't read. The reality is that that actually doesn't work though. If you've tried to teach a child who has been exposed to these strategies, or maybe you've tried to teach them, then you've probably figured out that they really encourage our kids to learn how to guess and not to read. Our kids are super smart. And so once they figure out that they can look at the picture and guess the word instead of having to go through the steps to be able to read the word, then they're going to transition to doing that strategy instead. And that strategy, although it works okay for some of those beginner books, really starts to fall apart once our kids have been reading for a year or two and they move beyond those beginner readers that are designed for those reading strategies. So once you're asking your child to read to learn instead of learning to read, then the entire system that they've built falls apart and it makes lots of frustration and lots of struggle for our kids. Sasha says, not since I pulled my kids out of public school. Yeah, Sasha, these methods are super popular in public schools right now. And I think the reason for that is because they look like they're working at first, and at first they're easier. And so we can give kids a really quick early win, but in the long term, it doesn't work. It's like trying to teach your child to eat by feeding them only dessert. At first, it feels like a great win, right? Because you've taught your child to eat all of these different kinds of food and they'll try just about anything and they love it. But the reality is that a diet full of only dessert is not going to raise a healthy adult. And the same is true with these reading strategies. Teaching only these guessing strategies and the sight words will give our kids some quick early wins on those easy books, but they aren't going to help them really become successful, fluent readers. Yeah, Cheryl says yes. School, balance system, sight words, yes, strategies. Yeah, so you've seen those too, for sure. Thanks, Lindsay. She says, good analogy with the dessert. Spot on. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, so we have to be really careful that we're teaching our kids the strategies that are going to set them up for long term success and not just that quick early win. Because we are going to be with our kids year after year after year after year. And so we can't just give them 1 year of success and then move them on to the next grade, right? We have to really teach them how to read. And the way that we do that is not with these guessing strategies. So it's really important that we as homeschool parents know what to teach our kids to be able to really help them have that long-term success. And it's tricky for us because a lot of us learned how to read using these whole word methods. And that's part of the problem because if you look at the statistics about reading in the United States right now, they're really, really sad. The statistics that I was hearing most recently are looking up said that about 2/3 of fourth graders are struggling with reading right now in our country. And also that 54% of adults are reading below a sixth grade level. So even for us as adults, unfortunately, the system that we've been in as we've been exposed to these whole word reading strategies are not working for us as a whole group. And it's doing a disservice for us as we go to teach our kids because a lot of us don't remember learning how to read, or we didn't learn with the strategies that really set kids up for success and that set kids up for success no matter what kind of brain they have and no matter whether they're naturally gifted towards reading or they're going to naturally struggle a little bit. We need strategies that work for every child, and these whole word strategies just are not going to do that. Yeah. So for us as parents, we need to make sure that we have a way to teach our kids how to read that is going to be more successful for them than what we learned ourselves. And the problem is that when we teach our kids using these whole word and these sight word methods, it causes our kids to guess words instead of reading them because they figured out that they can just look at the picture and guess, and that in the short term, that's easier. And so it causes this systematic problem of every time kids see a word they don't know, they'll always guess. Let me know in the comments if any of these things are happening with your kids in your homeschool right now. They're super, super common. Some of the biggest, most common problems that I hear parents talking about today. Kids guessing words instead of reading them. Also, these strategies work for a little while and then kids will get really frustrated. So if you're noticing a lot of frustration with your child, that might be what's happening. And then another big problem here is that sometimes kids can say the letter sounds, but they can't read the words. And so if you have a child that can say the sounds but can't read the words, then it's possible that they have either learned these strategies that don't really work, or they have been not learning how to put the sounds together to make words as well. So, inside of the Reading Better Together curriculum that I have, we break all of these things down step by step with scripted lessons that tell you exactly what to say and what to do to raise a confident reader and to help your child go from those very first sounds to being able to read words and sentences and stories independently. And it's a 32-week curriculum that does that. But today I want to share 3 of the biggest places where I see parents getting this wrong, and also where I see other curriculum options that are leading us astray. Because I think it's really important that all of us have access to this information and be able to teach our kids using these best strategies that researchers and scientists are telling us really work for kids. And so I want to break down 3 of my favorites today and 3 of the places that I think are really important for us as homeschool parents to focus. And of course, all of these are covered in much more depth inside of the reading curriculum if you are interested in going deeper on those. So, the first place that I see parents going astray most often, because a lot of our curriculums are leading us astray, is because of sight words. And so, I want to talk for just a minute about sight words because this is such an important topic for us. Yeah, Cheryl says the kids I work with guess and memorize words. It's funny to hear them read random wrong words based on guessing. Yeah, it's super obvious when they're guessing, isn't it, Cheryl? And it's interesting because sometimes what they guess can give us some clues about why they're guessing and sort of what's going on in their brain that can be helpful. We were talking about that inside the Reading Better Together community yesterday. I was working with a parent who her child can read sounds but is struggling to blend. And so we were talking about some of the choices that he's making when he's guessing and about how those can give her some clues to be able to know like what to do next, what to teach next. It was really interesting. But yeah, those guesses, some of them, it's like, how did you even know? Where did you come up with that? So yeah, those are funny. Okay, so I want to start by talking about sight words first because I think that this is one of the biggest places where we can go astray and one of the first things that comes up for us. Because I think that a lot of the resources out there that we tend to get exposed to and that tend to get marketed to us, especially as homeschool parents, encourage us to start with sight words first. And I would challenge you to switch that around and start with sounds first and teach sight words last. And the reason for that, again, is that we want to teach our kids that reading is a process of taking these sounds and putting them together to make words. And when we teach our kids the whole words first, we're teaching them to memorize words by their shape, like they were doing in those whole word reading methods. And that is what is going to cause our kids to guess. And it's also going to take a lot more time for kids. So in English, there are 44 letter sounds, and when you combine them together to make vowel teams and all of the other funky sounds and combinations that we have, we end up with still less than 300 total sounds and combinations of sounds that kids would need to memorize. And you can compare that to the Fry sight word list, for example, that has 100 words per list and then it has 10 lists. So you're 1,000 words just on that list. And then there's words that aren't on that list. So there's a lot more to memorize if your child has to memorize each individual word than if they are memorizing those sounds and then learning how to combine them together. If you've heard that analogy about teaching a man to fish and feeding him a fish, I think this really applies here too. So the analogy goes that, or the story goes that if you teach a man to fish, well, if you feed him a fish, he'll have fish for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he'll have fish for a lifetime. So the key there is that you're giving him a skill that he needs in order to be able to feed himself. And I think that the sounds and the sight words work the exact same way. So if we teach our kids a sight word or how to memorize a word, it's like we've given them a fish. They'll be able to read that one word whenever they see it in any context. But if we teach them the sounds, we're teaching them how to fish. We're giving them the skills that they need to be able to read any word that they see, not just the ones that they have already learned. So I'm teaching my daughter to read right now. I have two kiddos. My youngest is my daughter who is five, actually 5.5 now. I just got a really cute photo reminder of like her 6 month picture with the sticker. So she's officially 5.5, which I can't believe. But she's learning how to read. And we've been using Reading Better Together and all the methods. And I've really enjoyed going through that process with her and just remembering what it's like to be able to teach a child to read at home. And she's been having a lot of fun with it too. But she is at the point now, after doing enough of the lessons and going through enough of the things, where she's starting to make some connections on her own. And she's starting to be able to take some of the words that we've learned and the sounds that we've learned and then apply them to new words that we haven't learned. And this is like the most fun time of teaching a child to read, because she goes off into her room, she grabs one of her books, she comes back, and she's ready to read it to me. And it's not a book that we've practiced, it's not a book that I have gone through with her and helped her sound out the words. Granted, there are sometimes words that we need to sound out together, but for the most part, she's just able to pick up these books and figure out the words herself, because she's able to take the skills that we've learned from the books that we've read together and apply them to a brand new book on her own. And that's what we're going for with our kids. And that's the skill set that we're going to be able to give them when we start with the sounds first and then teach the sight words. Inside of Reading Better Together, there are actually videos for these as well. So if you're concerned about how to pronounce the sounds, because that's really important, or making sure that you're doing that correctly for your child, there are videos in there where you can just hit play and I will actually teach the sound to your child, and then you can reinforce it with them as well. So that's the first one. We want to start with teaching sounds first, not sight words, and we want to make sure that we're giving our kids those tools to really be successful. The second biggest place that I see things start to go astray when kids are learning how to read is that we need to actually teach our kids to be able to hear the sounds in the words. So this is the missing piece for those kids that can say the sounds, but they can't put them together and read the words. And it's no wonder that it's missing, because I very rarely, I don't know of another homeschool curriculum, honestly, that teaches this. Maybe one, but not a common one. Other than Reading Better Together. So there are a lot of curriculums that don't teach this, and it's a skill that kids need to know. They need to be able to look at a word and understand that that word is made up of sounds, and that when you put sounds together, you can make a word. And that sounds really obvious to us as adults and as independent readers, but our kids are not born understanding that. And so that's something that we have to teach them, is that words are made up of sounds and that you can combine the sounds to make words. Yeah, phonological awareness. Exactly, Lindsay. Yeah, so the $10 teacher word for this is phonological awareness or phonemic awareness. And you can Google those and go down a whole rabbit hole after this. It is fascinating. But those are the skills that we really need to make sure that we're teaching our kids. And those are the skills that are missing from a lot of learn to read curriculums, which honestly is really sad. This skill is especially important if you have a child with dyslexia, if you suspect dyslexia, or if either of your child's, like you or your husband or your spouse or whatever, your child's parents had problems with learning to read. This is especially important, because dyslexia is genetic. So if you have people in your family who had problems with reading, there is a higher chance that your child might have problems with reading as well. And then also, it's really important because if your child does have dyslexia, this is often a skill that is missing or one that they really struggle with. And so it's important that we give them specific practice in how to do it. So the key idea here that we need our kids to understand is that words are made up of sounds and that you can combine those sounds together to make words. And that makes sense, right? Because when our kids are putting the sounds together and reading the words, if they don't understand that words are made up of sounds and that you can do that, then they're going to have a really hard time when it comes time to blend. So inside of Reading Better Together, there's a whole section where it walks you through how to do this. There's games where you can print the game cards and read them to your child, and it'll teach them all the skills while they're playing these games with you, which are a lot of fun. But you can also do this verbally while you work on the sounds, even, or before you're teaching your child to read, while you're teaching your child to read, you can practice these verbally as well. There are lots of different phonological and phonemic awareness skills that kids need to learn, but you can start with just some really simple ones that you can do out loud. So things like you say a word and ask your child, what is the first sound in this word? So, what is the first sound in cat? And then hopefully your child would hear that sound and be able to tell you k, and they'd be able to hear that sound. So things like that are ways that you can practice this phonological and phonemic awareness. You can also say a word really slowly and have your child see if they can figure it out. So you can go, mat, and see if they can put that together and make mat. So there's lots more ways than this to practice this. There's a whole sequence of things that you can do, and that's all inside of Reading Better Together. But the point is that you want to be practicing these skills with your child on purpose. That's really important, especially for kids with dyslexia, but really for all kids that are learning to read, to help them understand that those words are put together, words are made up of sounds, and that sounds go together to make words. That's the piece that's missing, and that's the really important piece that kids definitely need. Yeah. Okay. Cheryl says, what age do you start teaching sounds? That is a great question, Cheryl. And I think it depends on your child a little bit. There's not a blanket age that when you hit 3, every child is ready to learn to read. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. There's sort of a continuum of ages. The research says that most kids will learn to read somewhere between the ages of 3 and 7. So you would definitely want to start your sounds by then. There is also research that says that if kids know 18 uppercase letters and 15 lowercase letters by the time they reach the end of preschool or the beginning of kindergarten, that they're more likely to be successful in reading throughout elementary school. The challenge with that research, though, is that that applies specifically to kids in public schools. And I think because of the way that we work one-on-one with our kids in homeschool, we do have a little bit of leniency on that statistic. So I think that if we aren't quite there at the end of preschool, beginning of kindergarten, that's not a huge deal. But in general, you want to start working on these sounds, I'd say, in preschool. You can start with letter names first and then go to sounds, or you can teach them both together, the letter name and the sound at the same time. I've heard people that I respect advocate for both of those sides, and it really depends on you and what you feel comfortable teaching your child. But that's a skill that I would want to start working on when they're in preschool with fun games and activities. So I'm not advocating that you would sit your preschooler down for an hour at a desk and say, now we're going to drill sounds. But I think there are lots of really fun ways that you can incorporate those things into their play as they're playing. So just like you're teaching your preschooler that this color is red and this color is blue and this shape is a square, you can also be teaching them the letter names as they see those letters, and then also the most common letter sounds as they're playing as well. And so you can do all of those things in a low stress environment through play, and then the sooner that they can get those things, the sooner that you can move on and start working on reading. Does that help, Cheryl? If you have follow-up questions, let me know for sure. Okay, so that was the second thing that we should really be focusing on, is making sure that our kids understand that words are made up of sounds and that sounds can be combined together to make words. And we do that through those activities that we're doing out loud with our kids. So we want to make sure that we're doing those. That's really, really important. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about is books, because I have seen this go astray in so many different ways. But I think it's really, really important that we get our kids reading books as soon as possible. Choosing the right book for our child and helping them have a positive experience reading it, I think, is so important in making learning to read fun and rewarding for our kids. This is where I went astray when I was teaching my oldest to read, because the reading curriculum that we were using was one that didn't even have books at all. He would learn some words, and then he would do some sentences, and then it had sort of a passage in the textbook that he was supposed to read. And I realized as we were going through this process together that he was not connecting what he was doing in those passages with being able to read the books that he loved. He didn't understand that practicing this skill was going to allow him to become a reader and to be able to access all of those books that he loved reading from the library and be able to read them to himself. And so I think giving our kids a positive experience with something that has a cover and pages as soon as possible in the reading process is really important to help our kids see the goal, to see what it is that they're working towards. I think this is really, really important. And it's really tricky because there are a lot of books out there that are marketed for and to beginner readers that are going to send our kids back down the guessing path and that aren't going to support them in learning to read. So the trick is you need one that's going to support them in learning to read and also give them that positive experience with the books at the same time. So I want to show you what to avoid and then also what to look for. So this is what to avoid. This is Guided Science Reader the Kitten. I love kittens. I have a soft spot in my heart for kittens. This is not a book to use to teach your child how to read because when you open it up on the inside, it's got a really obvious pattern. So hopefully you can see what I'm holding up to the screen, and if not, I'm going to tell you what it says. It has a whole bunch of pages that all start with the kitten is in the, and then one more word. So on this particular page, it says the kitten is in the basket, and it has a picture of a kitten in a basket. And then it says the kitten is in the box, and it has a picture of a kitten in a box. I'm willing to bet that if my child had read this book one time, and I covered up the words down here, that my child could still probably read this book. So if I turn this page, let's do a test. I'm going to turn the page to a page you've never seen before and cover up the words. What would it say? You can write it in the comments if you want. There's a picture of a kitten, and she's sitting in a straw hat. So the words on this page say, the kitten is in the hat. So you don't even need the words to be able to read this book. And our kids are smart enough that they're going to figure that out too. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding any kind of repetitive books and also that we're avoiding books that have picture clues like this because this is exactly what is going to teach our child how to guess instead of how to read. And there are a whole lot of these out there in all sorts of different forms and different series. And so it's really important that we make sure that we avoid those because it's going to send us right back to what we were talking about at the beginning about how important it is to teach sounds and to teach our kids to read words and to not encourage them to guess. Those books will encourage them to guess. So you're looking for a book that's decodable. That means that your child can read every single word on every single page by sounding it out. Some of the researchers will say that it's okay to have a word or two that your child doesn't know. I agree, but for the most part, you're looking for completely decodable, something where your child will be able to sound out every single word that they see. And when you find those kind of books, those are the ones that are going to encourage your child to sound out the words because they'll be able to do that. But the problem with those books is that a lot of them can be really boring and sort of choppy and not have a lot of plot. So I want to show you a book that I made that is similar to one that I found when I was teaching my son. I told you that he was struggling because he couldn't see why it was that we were doing what we were doing with those little passages. And so I went to our library and looked around for any book that I could find that would encourage him to want to read. And I found some of these decodable ones and they weren't, they were okay, but they weren't exciting. And I wasn't sure if they were going to motivate him. And then we found this one book that had parent and child pages so that a parent and a child could read it together. And the parent pages had more complex text, more details to be able to really tell the story. And then the child pages were simpler and designed for a child to be able to read so that they could sound out all of the words on the page. And so we read this book over and over and over and over again. I looked for more of them, and of course the series was out of print. But I recognized that I thought parents really needed these. I really needed them for my son. And so that was where the Reading Better Together curriculum came from. And it started with this set of side by side reading books. Today, inside the curriculum, there are 62 of these books so that you have access to 2 of them a week while you're teaching your child to read, that are designed to go along with the skills that your child is learning that week. And all of the pages are set up just like the parent child pages of that book that I saw in the library all that time ago. So we have the parent page that has the information for the parents to read so that there's a story happening and details and plot. And then we have the child pages that have just a few words that are simple for kids to sound out, that fit with the skills that they're learning and the difficulty level that they're able to read at the point when that story comes up. So I love these stories because they really help kids see what they're working towards, and they encourage them to learn to read and not to learn to guess. Let's see. Lindsay says, this would be great if you're working with a child with speech issues and your objective is prepositions, positional language, not to teach reading. Yes, love that. Oh, you're talking about the book. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Lindsay. So this book, the kitten book, Lindsay was saying that if you want to teach the idea of in, that it would be great for that. The kitten is in the grass, the kitten is in the flowers, and helping your child understand what it means to be in something. Yeah, it would be great for that. I love that. Good thought. Yeah, not for reading. Definitely not. Yeah. Okay, so those decodable books are a lot of fun for kids, and one of the when I talk to parents who are using the Reading Better Together curriculum, a lot of them will say that that's their kids' favorite part. The curriculum comes with 32 weeks of scripted lessons, which means you will know exactly what to say to your child. You're not going to have to do any of the guessing or wondering if you're teaching your child to read using the right order of things, because it goes through all of the skills that your child will need to know step by step and sequentially, and tells you exactly what to say to your child and then what they should say back to you to help you learn how to read. And all of the lessons are designed to take about 10 minutes or so and to break up into different activities. So they're designed for active kids and busy families. I taught my son to read while I was also at home with my colicky newborn daughter. And so I recognized the need for short lessons that only take a few minutes. And so that was what I made. You also get 62 of those side-by-side reading books, and you get community support. I think this is the thing that really makes Reading Better Together different, because most of the time when we purchase a homeschool curriculum, you get the curriculum and then you're on your own. Either it works or it doesn't. If it's not working for your family, you have to go in a Facebook group or ask a friend or try to figure out what to do on your own. And then if it still doesn't work, then you just toss it in the pile and go get something else. And Reading Better Together does not work that way. It comes with a ton of support, including support from me to be able to ask questions as you're using the curriculum. I am actually in the process of improving and expanding and revamping the support community for Reading Better Together. It just moved 2 or 3 weeks ago to its very own app. So everything is completely off of social media and in a private community where you can go and ask questions and get support. Right now, when you purchase the curriculum, you get lifetime access to support, and that is going to be going away probably this month. Probably very soon, maybe sooner than that. But the next time that I publicize Reading Better Together to everybody who's in the email community and all that stuff, it will not be coming with lifetime support, because I'm going to be pouring so many resources into that support community that I'm going to be charging separately for it. And so now is a really great time to join the curriculum, because you then would be grandfathered into that lifetime support in that community as well. Lots of people have told me not to do that, not to offer lifetime support, but I'm doing it for a little while longer. So if that's something that you're interested in, now is the time to jump in. Okay, what about teaching ESL? Ooh, that's a whole nother topic. We could probably talk about that for another hour at least. That's a great question. Do you have specific questions about teaching ESL that I can try to hop into and answer for right now? Let me know. Yeah, Let me know if there's something specific about that I can answer. What about teaching us? Yeah, uh-huh. So when she says ESL, she's talking about English as a second language or English language learners. I just went to a reading teacher training 2 weeks ago now, where we talked a lot about English language learners and English as a second language. And so the Reading Better Together curriculum does work really well for that. When we're teaching the sounds, we do a lot of activity-based things. So we're getting out mirrors and we're talking about, how our mouth looks and where our tongue is and all those things. And those things can really help to make those sounds easier for those second language or the English language learners, because they're getting a chance to see it and to really feel it, and those things can really help. And it is really important, again, to go sequentially through and to teach the skills one at a time. It's also really important when you're teaching ESL or English as a second language that you're also working on vocabulary. And so you want to be reading books with your child as well, like these side by side readers, so that they're getting a chance to be exposed to some of the vocabulary things as well. Let me know if you have a specific question about that, though, like what to do or a specific thing that I can answer. Lindsay said, I would use this with ESL because you're teaching the decoding and encoding skills that they'll need, and language processing would be something to work with explicitly separately. I love Reading Better Together for ESL and neurodivergent students. Sarah has designed an amazing curriculum for all learners. I really believe this. Aw, thanks, Lindsay. That's really sweet. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really trying as I go through the curriculum to make sure that everything is always up to date with what the research is saying about the best ways for kids to learn to read, and then continuing to provide that support as well. And I also think that whenever you have any of these extenuating circumstances going on, you're teaching a child to read in English and English isn't their first language, or you've got a child that is struggling with a learning disability or with dyslexia, or there's speech challenges, or there's something else going on that is making reading more difficult for them, I think it becomes even more important at that point to get the support that you need to really make sure that the process that you're doing is working for your child. And it's even more important to have a place to be able to come and get support if you need it as well. And that's the thing that I'm really the most excited about and the most passionate about with Reading Better Together. I love getting to jump on these calls with parents and just troubleshoot questions that they're having, and be able to work through issues. And that's something that we do all the time in that community. Yeah. Okay, I am not seeing any other questions, and it is almost 5 o'clock here in the East Coast. So we are going to get going, but I hope that this was helpful to you, and I really enjoyed getting to chat with you today. I'm sure we'll do something like this in the group again soon. If you have specific questions that you'd like me to answer, or if you have a topic that you would like to talk about here in the group, you are welcome to put that in the chat, or you're welcome to send me an email as well. My email is sarah@homeschoolingforhim.com, and you're welcome to send that. Let's see. Cheryl says, what is the difference between your curriculum and Hooked on Phonics? Okay, so the two biggest differences, Cheryl, Hooked on Phonics is also a phonics-based curriculum, right? So you're also going to be learning the letter sounds and then combining them together to make words. So that's really good for that one. And Reading Better Together is designed that way too. So the way that the lessons teach reading is going to be kind of similar. The main differences there, Hooked on Phonics has the app. Reading Better Together does not have an app for kids. And then the big differences are that Reading Better Together has those side-by-side stories. I have not seen those anywhere else, the ones that you and your child can read together. And I think that that's really important. I was just reading some research last week about kids using tablets and e-readers to read, and they were talking about how the skills that kids use when they learn to read, or when they read on a tablet or an e-reader, are different than the skills that kids learn to read when they read a printed book. So I think that that's something that's really important important and something that we need to make sure that we're exposing our kids to. So the books are a big difference, and then also the community support is the other piece that's really different. I think that's something that really sets Reading Better Together apart and something that I'm really proud of. Hopefully that answers the question. Let me know if you have follow-up questions about that, Cheryl. Okay. I am not seeing any other questions, so we're going to go ahead and end. But thank you so much, everybody, for a fantastic class. I hope that you enjoyed this. I love getting to talk to you and to share things like this, and so we'll definitely do something like this again. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week and that things are going well on your reading journey with your child. And again, if there's anything that I can ever do to help, please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this video, which was recorded live in the Homeschool Reading Community Group. This is a free Facebook group where I share tips and advice about homeschooling and teaching reading. You'll also find community with other homeschool moms like you, plus freebies, giveaways, parties, and more. I would love for you to join us over at the Homeschool Reading Community. Make sure that you check out the link in the description of this video for all the details.